Just wanted to show you a new prototype for a game I've been working on. This is just a self-made project, not for sale, anything like that. I'm making a Mech Warrior tabletop game that uses simplified rules, so you don't have to spend 3 hours trying to figure it out or play through a round. Each round takes under an hour, depending on how many mechs and players you have on the table. But like I said, simplified rules, simplified movement, line of sight. Everything is pretty compact, and I've had people playing this game that do not play tabletop games at all, and they did pretty well after just the first 5 minutes of explaining things. So I'm going to spend some time going over the mechanics of it, how things work. We'll look at some of the cool mechs we got 3D printed here, and then we'll wrap it up and hopefully in the future do some cool gameplay videos. Stay tuned. So I currently have 3 different objective styles. One is simple search and destroy, where you have to kill every mech on the enemy team. The next is collection of the green gems or radioactive isotopes around the map. Just a matter of running them over and collecting more than the enemy team. And then the third is the crashed ship here. That one you basically just have to run a mech up to it and stay in contact with it for 6 turns without breaking contact, which would mean you could take a lot of damage from the enemy. So it's up to the team to make sure they can disperse damage and keep the enemy away. You'd simply make contact with the target, place a 6 or a D6 down, and then every turn rotate it. And if you ever break contact with it to retreat, then you reset the die. There are 2 main game modes as far as players are concerned. One is co-op style, where all the players on one side are playing against numerous AI. In these types of games, I tend to give the AI 1 extra mech or so, just to balance things out, since they don't make as smart of decisions as the players do. And then the other, more fun game mode is player versus player, where you can have, honestly, up to 5v5 in this game, and that's only limited by the fact that I have only 11 mechs currently. So to keep things equal, 5v5, a lot of fun, a lot of strategic moves, a lot of planning, good times. So a move for a player allows them to move and shoot in any order as long as they do not exceed the maximum heat of their mech. So I could easily step forward and have line of sight on the target and fire. Then I could use whatever heat points I had left over and take a step back. Another thing to keep in mind is rotation. A mech's line of sight or angle of fire comes off 45 degrees from either side of his square. So I can see diagonally this way through all these squares, and the same for the other side. So as long as an enemy target is within that diagonal line coming off of my square, I can see them. If they're not, I may need to rotate the mech. So let's say I was up here. My diagonal lines travels through this square, and this square, so I cannot see or fire on the Sun Spider. So I would need to spend a heat to turn if I'm standing still. If I'm doing this as part of an existing move, I can turn in that move without spending the extra heat to rotate. So we're going to talk about AI movement on the board. For an AI to move, simply going to take 2 dice, one standard D6 and this AI movement die. his maximum movement is 5, so no matter what I roll on here, it cannot exceed 5. So for his turn, so we're going to take these dice, give him a roll. So he's going to go diagonal right 2 places. So diagonal right is forward to the right, 1, 2. When it comes back around to his turn, let's see what else he would do. Sidestep right 6 places. So since we rolled a 6, but we know that the sun spider can only move up to 5, we're going to adjust that to 5. Sidestep right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now at the beginning of the AI's turn, they're always going to scan for targets. So obviously in this case, if he would easily see my hunchback. If there was, say, a building in the way, and he scans 360 degrees and does not see any viable targets, he's going to continue with his move phase. So this one says diagonal right 3 places, so he'll go 1, 2, 3, and he will again scan for targets. Now, if he finds a target, he'll face it. If he has not fired previously in this same turn, before the move, then he'll attempt to take a shot at the end of the turn. If they do fire at the beginning of the turn, they skip shooting at the end of the turn. So in this case, we can see that he does have line of sight with the hunchback, and he could fire. Alright, let's dig a little deeper into AI movement. We already talked about the fact that they use this movement die and a D6. So we'll do some simulations here to show you what happens in different situations. So if he does a diagonal right, that's obviously moving forward, but diagonally to the right. And if they come across a building and they still have moves left over, or the next move tells them to move forward, they're going to turn towards the nearest corner that is in front of them. So in this case, he's not going to turn right, because that doesn't give him an out. That's not the nearest side. So there's 2 building spaces here in front of him. He's going to go to the nearest one, which is in front of him, and just turn 90 degrees and continue on his way out there. If he does a sidestep up to a building, let's say he's here, and let's say he gets sidestep 3. He's going to go 1, and then if he's facing or not facing the building, he's going to continue forward with the remainder of those steps. 2, 3. If he was moving forward and got 3 spaces, 1, he's obviously facing the building, so he has to decide which way he's going to go. He's always going to turn towards the nearest corner of the building. So in this case, 2, 3. If they get diagonal right up to the side of a building, let's say like this, so he goes 1. Once again, he's going to continue forward, sliding along the building. 2, 3. So your 3 moves on here are basically forwards, diagonals, and side steps, left and right. And there's 2 for forward, because that's usually the most useful move when the AI is automatically targeting and facing the enemy. There are times where the AI may approach the edge of the map. Anytime they approach the edge of the map and have turns left over, or the next turn needs them to move forward or in some forward direction, they're going to do a 180 and continue with the remaining steps they have left over. Mechs overall cannot walk through any building tiles. So if there's a semi-truck here, you cannot walk through that space, you can't walk through buildings, and you cannot climb on top of or jump jet on top of buildings and stay there. I'm trying to keep the rules simple, and I do not have an elevation advantage in a fight. the line of sight rules in the game are relatively simple. If the center of your mech stand can see the center of their mech stand, they're a viable target. If that is not true, it's not a viable target. Easy way to figure this out in some cases is just take a diagonal line through the squares. So if this guy's over here, and I can draw a straight diagonal line from my mech through the spaces into the center of the other mech, that's a viable target. Just imagine an infinitely narrow line traveling through the corners of your squares. If you're not in line with them diagonally, then you can probably imagine that I can no longer see the center of his space or his stand. Alright, let me show you just a brief rundown on how the combat works. So if my hunchback is going to shoot at this AI sun spider, first we're going to check the range. So my mech can shoot at range 11. Clearly we're within 11 spaces here. So then I would simply decide what category of component I want to hit. Let's say I want to go for legs to slow this guy down. So I'm going to select the die that has 4 leg icons on it. It also has a weapon and a torso icon. Each of these specific dice have 4 of one type and 1 of each of the other. So I have a higher chance of hitting legs if I use this one. So I'm going to select that, and I'm also going to select however many dice I want to fire with. Since my hunchback is not moving, I'm going to use up 4 heat to fire all 4 of my large pulse lasers, which will give me 4 dice. So now I'm going to fire by rolling all these dice against the sun spider. So we hit legs, which is good, and we got 2 out of 4 hits. So I come over to legs on this guy, take a cube, and count down 1, 2. 2 hits to legs. He has 4 hit points left. When the cube lands on this, the legs are damaged or destroyed to the point of slowing the sun spider down to only 1 space per turn. Alright, now as far as AI combat goes, it's very similar to player combat or playing as a player. So for the sun spider acting as an AI, he's going to be using the AI combat box over here. So very simply, we're going to check the range of the target. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So from range 7 to 14, he's going to be using 3 dice. If he was at 1 to 6, he would get the additional 2 die because he has the light rocket launchers. But we're at 7, so we're going to be using 3 dice. So we select 3 dice, and then instead of using the orange component dice, they're going to use an equal-sided AI dice. It's got 2 legs, 2 torsos, and 2 weapon icons. Because the AI can't decide on specific components without putting too much player thought into it. So, he's going to roll those. So we hit legs, and 2 out of 3 hit. So, I come over to my mech here. Takes 1, 2 damage to legs. That's your AI combat turn. Alright, so if my weapons or my legs take full damage, they add effects to the mech. So, for legs, let's go over here and look at this flea who only has 4 hit points for legs. If he loses all 4 hit points and is sitting on the black X, he is legged, and we take a token, and we place it by the mech. So for the rest of the game, his movement speed is limited to 1. Normally he could move up to 6 spaces using his heat, but now he's limited to 1 space every turn. That goes for AI and players alike. If a mech loses weapons, their dice count per shot are reduced by 2 dice. So let's say this was an AI dragon. He would normally get 4 dice at range 1 to 10. So if he's firing at this flea, but his weapons are damaged, his 4 dice are reduced to 2. And then he'd take his targeting die, and that's all he would get for this shot because his weapons are heavily damaged, resulting in 1 hit to the legs. Now that brings up an interesting point. If the legs or weapons of any mech are completely down and they have tokens next to them, any damage hitting that same component again, say the legs in this case, automatically goes to the torso. So if this guy took 1 hit to the legs, he's going to take a hit to the torso instead. There are also situations where you can get additional damage bonuses depending on how you hit the enemy. So let's say this Hellspawn has walked up behind the Jaguar and is shooting him in the back. The back counts as anything 45 degrees off of the square that the mech sits on. So just like our front field of view is 45 degrees off the front, the back is 45 degrees off the back. So anything in this cone back here is considered hitting the enemy in the back. If you hit them in the torso, in the back of the torso, you automatically get an additional point of damage. So let's say this Hellspawn here hits him for 3 damage, but he hits him in the torso in the back. That's a extra point of damage. So it gives players the incentive to try to get around behind the enemy or get the enemy to rotate away from them. And it's an incentive for the ones getting shot at to make sure they're facing any other direction but away from the enemy that's firing at them. Another interesting point to add is if at any point you get a 3 or higher hits against a target, whether it's the back or the torso, the weapons, the legs, if you get 3 or higher, that counts as a critical hit and you get an additional hit point. So that's any hits from 1 salvo. If you get 3 or more, you get an additional point. Doesn't matter what you're hitting. Now that can get really interesting when you're shooting at somebody in the back of the torso. If this mech, the Hellspawn, fires at the Jaguar in the back and gets 2 hits, we already know he gets an additional hit because he's shooting him in the back. That counts as 3 hits. He got 3 hits, which now counts as a critical hit. So you get a 4th. It happens sometimes. It's a lot of fun when it does. You can go from 2 shots to the back to 4 shots. It's devastating. So don't face your back towards the enemy. One of the more interesting weapon types here is artillery. So the catapult can fire salvos of rockets or missiles onto targets even if you can't see them through line of sight, as long as somebody on his team does have line of sight with a target and the catapult is within 15 spaces, but no closer than 5. So this locust has line of sight on the flea, and therefore the catapult, who's within 12 spaces, can fire inaccurate rounds over to the flea. So when I say inaccurate, that means he does not get to use these specific targeting die, because it's kind of hard to target specific components when you're firing a volley of rockets over a bunch of buildings. So for every hit he gets, he's going to be using the AI die. So he would get 5 dice. So he's going to roll 5 dice independently. That's 4 hits. Now for each of these hits, because this is artillery, he has to roll the die once for each hit. So one rocket is going to hit the weapons of the enemy. The next is going to hit the torso. The third will hit the torso. And the fourth will hit the legs. So the damage is more spread out. You do get a lot of dice, but your damage isn't going to be very accurate. You're not going to be coring enemies out or knocking out legs all in one shot unless you get some really lucky rolls on the targeting die. So it's a fun mech to play if you like sitting back and just launching rockets over buildings, and it's a lot of fun for your teammate in a small fast mech preferably to get line of sight without getting himself shot. So I've been working on a excess heat mechanic. We all know in the Mech Warrior universe, if you overheat, your mech will shut down and restart, giving the enemy time to get in behind you and do some major damage. So here's what I came up with. If you go over your maximum heat, which you're allowed to do up to only 1 point per turn, then you run the risk of this shutdown. So the flea has a maximum of 6 heat. If he runs 6 spaces, he's fine, no issues. If he wants to, he can push that by 1 per turn, so he could attempt to take 7, or he can take 7 moves or use up 7 heat on weapons and movement. So let's say he does that. He moves 7 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he's just gone 1 point of heat further than he's actually allowed to. So he's going to store up 1 red heat token, which means he has to roll a d6 and declare 1 number prior to rolling, hoping not to hit it. So he's going to declare 2. Oh, he hit a 2. So because he hit a 2, his mech goes into shutdown mode. So he's basically standing still, defenseless, for 1 turn, allowing opposing mechs 2 turns to get up to him and do damage. So let's say he hadn't rolled a 2 and rolled something other than what he declared, rolled a 3. That would mean that he got away with spending an extra heat, and he can attempt to do that again. So let's say on the next turn he's pushing his luck and he wants to run 7 spaces again just to get that edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he's once again gone above his heat by 1. He's gone to 7. So he's going to acquire a second token. In this case, he has to declare 2 numbers before rolling the dice. So he's going to declare 3 and 5. He rolls a 3. So again, in this case, he's going to shut down for 1 turn. Now, whenever you do have a shutdown, it does clear your heat. So after a shutdown, you do get the advantage of being able to start from the bottom again with, 1s and 2s and low numbers. If for some reason you manage to get through without shutting down and you acquire 6 heat, it's a guarantee you're going to shut down next time, or the time we roll, because you have to declare 6 different numbers and a d6 only has 6 sides. So basically you're pushing your luck by going past 5, really pushing your luck. It's a guarantee you're going to shut down. But if you can manage to do it, shut down behind a building, shut down away from the enemy, and allow you to clear that heat, that's going to give you those extra heat points to use if you're willing to push it again in the future turns. Okay, let's go over some perks. Every player mech gets to carry 1 perk card through the game Gives them just one little different item that they can use to try to play towards their advantages. So the first one we have here is target acquisition. This allows you to re-roll your current system's targeting die. If you don't like the first result, you may not switch to a different die. So if I roll this and let's say I land on weapons, but I was aiming for legs, I can re-roll it one time, hoping to get a more desirable result. You cannot switch to a different die after selecting the first one. Then we have Jump Jet. This allows us to fly over obstacles using 1 heat per obstacle space traveled. You cannot stop on or in an obstacle tile. So if this Locust had Jump Jet, instead of having to run all the way around the building, you could use 1, 2, and 3 heat to get to that space. Then we have ECM. If you place an ECM token by your mech, for 1 turn, any players attacking you or an ally within 2 spaces must use the black and white targeting die. So if I have an ECM Flea, as long as he has used the 1 heat cost to pop his ECM and placing the token by his mech, any incoming hits to himself or any ally within 2 spaces means that the enemy has to use this random equal-sided targeting die instead of the specific one they're trying to hit. So if they're trying to hit him in the legs, but they roll weapons, that's going to be good for our team here, both him and any ally within 2 spaces. Next we have the Armor perk. Allocate 2 yellow cubes to any systems on your mech card. As damage hits them, they are removed and block 1 point of incoming damage each. So this catapult pilot chose to add 2 pieces of armor to his legs. So as damage would hit the legs, the first block would take 1 point of damage, second one would take 2 points of damage, and then after that he still has his entire leg grid good to go. Moving over to Cool Shot. I like this one a lot. Collect 5 blue gems at the start of the game, spend 1 cube to add an additional heat point to your current turn. You may only spend 1 per turn. So what this allows you to do is squeeze out a little extra heat from your mech every turn that you choose to. So you get 5 cool shots. This catapult has 5 heat, so he could currently run 5 spaces or shoot all of his weapons, one or the other. But if he adds a cool shot, he basically gets 6 heat to use, so he could fire all of his weapons and still move 1 space. So that would use up one of those cool shot gems, and he would have 4 left for the remaining gameplay. Then we have damage control. This one, you spend a heat to move 1 damage point from any system to another. So if this catapult's taking a break and he has a little bit of heat to spare, you can spend 1 heat and basically remove a damage point from his weapons and allocate it to something else, say his torso. So if you have a weak spot and you're about to lose it, you can use the damage control to kind of back it off, but that damage has to go somewhere, so your torso or whatever other component you pick is going to eat it up. Alright, then we have the airstrike. Using line of sight, call in an airstrike to a space at any range. Resolve as 6-shot artillery for every mech within 2 spaces of the target. And this is a 1-time perk. So basically, as we talked about with artillery, you would select the appropriate number of dice, and for every hit that you get, you would use the AI targeting die, which is going to spread the damage out randomly on the target. But nice advantage of it is it hits any target within 2 spaces of the target space. So if I was to attack, let's use this gem as a targeting thing, if I was to attack that space, both mechs are within 2 spaces and would take the damage from the dice. And finally we have the defense field. Place a defense field token by your mech. For 1 turn, reroll up to 2 incoming hits to yourself and any ally within 2 spaces. This one does cost a heat to apply every time you want to use it. So if I took the defense field, put it over by my flea here, as we said, for 1 turn, reroll up to 2 incoming hits. So let's say the enemy rolled 2 hits on us. I get to pick both of those dice up and re-roll them 1 time. So I reduced it by 1, which is going to help us out. And that is for each ally within 2 spaces as well. So any ally within 2 spaces also gets to pick up whatever damage is coming at them and re-roll some of them. So this guy has 3 hits coming at him. He can pick up 2 of those, re-roll them. So he reduced that one by 1. And those can happen simultaneously on turns as long as that defense field token is there. So if this guy gets hit by enemy player number 1 and then enemy player number 2 shoots at this guy, they both get to roll with the defense field. And those are your perks. There'll probably be changes and tweaks coming to them, maybe some new ones. We'll see how it goes. Well, that's basically it for the rules so far. Obviously I have some terrain to finish painting, a couple of items that need some details, and I might do some work on the maps. Just got a little bit of vinyl I got from Joann Fabrics on sale. Very nice stuff, doesn't crease, has a nice texture. All I did was add these 1 1/4 inch tick marks because I prefer not having a full grid on my maps. It kind of messes with the look of the terrain. This looks relatively good at distance. So yeah, I'm gonna continue working on this and do some gameplay videos to show you how a round goes, and then we will hopefully have a finished product to show off. Thanks for watching.